Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. It is mid-June. We made it. No one ever says we made it in the middle of a month. I feel like it's worth, it gets neglected the middle of the month. Everybody's like, oh, is this over yet? Or when did this happen?
Yep.
It gets a bad rap. Let's just celebrate we made it to the middle. No, a lot of people are all excited about the start. And yeah, when we finish this thing, let's be excited. But let's just be excited that we're in the middle of something.
Yeah. You think it's because it's usually messy? Like the messy middle is what they tend to call the middle of things?
I knew you were going to go there.
Well,
Scott Belsky.
I don't know who that is, but right on.
He's the one who wrote The Messy Middle.
Oh, that makes sense. Never read it.
It's a book. It's a book, and it's really good,
Okay.
actually. You should read it. But let's celebrate the middle today with 7 ways to get your people to work on time. I'm talking to you, late person. I don't know what else to call them. But we're excited to be here. We want to remind you we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. If you are listening to us on an audio podcast platform, we're super appreciative that you are here. If you're on the Apple podcast platform, I just realized this. You can only do the 5-star rating and review if you're on Apple Podcasts. If you're on Spotify Podcasts, I would super love for you to follow us. That's what you do on Spotify. You follow. It's not a subscribe or a rating or anything. It's you just follow us. So if you're listening on Spotify, hello there. We love our friends at Spotify. Longtime Spotify user here. So yeah, we'd love for that to happen if you would be so kind. Also, you can find us on YouTube, where you can see our faces and watch Blake blow on his coffee before he sips it. Sound effects added. We would love for you to like, subscribe, ring the bell. All those buttons are right there in the same little cluster on YouTube. So you might as well go and do all three of them while you're there. That way you're notified every time we drop new content. We're posting a lot more shorter content. You have spoken and we have listened. That the shorter the content, the better. So that concludes today's episode of the Culture Based Podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in. Just kidding. That's not all of it. We're just getting started. But we will have some shorter content for you there if you like the bite-sized nuggets. Culture nuggets. When we start calling them that?
Ooh, little nuggies.
Little culture nuggies. Sure, why not? You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, all the places at The Culture Base, BASE. And you can follow us, or you can find out more about us at theculturebase.com. We're working on some free resources there to drop to you very, very soon. All right. I think that's all the business. So today, Blake, we're going to get into 7 ways to get people to work on time. In a day and age when everyone has a podcast and everyone wants to be an influencer, right? I'm talking to you, Blake. It seems that we have hit a plateau in which younger generations, I'm not even going to say it's just Z, because I think it's more than that. Younger generations are a little motivated to get to work for very long. So how do you create a culture that draws others to work when they would be reluctant otherwise?
Yeah, I obviously this is like really big in many companies that we work with, in our own companies. Like these are problems or not problems, depending on, what we'll talk about here later. But these are things that we need to address and deal with. And it's really easy to be a generational slammer at this point. And I really like that Dustin didn't just say it's all the younger generation, because it's not. It's a mindset. And this mindset, whether it's come from other influencers or social media, where they're like, oh, you shouldn't have to go to work. You should just exist and make $10 million every day. And that's not real, right? Like, and honestly, it doesn't even feel like a very fun game anyway. And so it's one of those things, though, that everyone, it seems to be, is creating this entitled mentality that we're all just kind of falling into this. And I'll tell you, if you think that it's just one generation, then you're looking for it to just be one generation, okay? Because it's not. This is pretty normal for Gen Zs, millennials, Gen Xers. This is standard, but there are some problems connected with it that allow it to be standard. And I've fallen into a lot of these. I've fallen into not doing certain things and doing certain things. that just didn't work. And it created a culture that was just like, yeah, whatever's fine. And so I think there are a lot of things that we're going to dig into that are going to hopefully help with this. And a lot of these have come through making mistakes too. Okay. So, I don't think I have anything else. You got anything else on that?
No, yeah, I would just say that's the benefit of podcasts and books and learning in general, right? Is you're learning from people's mistakes. Usually, that's where the ideas come out of. Right? So why we talk all the time about celebrating failures is because in failures you learn, right? You have an opportunity to learn from those mistakes and go, hey, this happened. Next generation, person behind me, person that I'm growing and developing, don't make the same mistake I did. Same thing in parenting, right? There's so many parallels, I think, in parenting and business leadership that we could take from. But I think our topic today, Blake, does beg the question for us to answer first before we get into these 7 ways that we want to share with you. Is does every company need every position to show up on time?
Yeah.
And what does even on time mean?
Exactly. And I think there's an older mentality that would say, absolutely, everything has to be there all the time. This is the way we've always done it, which is a phrase that we don't even allow in our company. That's like this, not that. We don't say it's the way I've always done it, because that begs to say that the older way is always better than the newer way, right? And that's just not true, right? There are a lot of things and advancements that we're going to do. They're going to be better for the team at a big level overall. So my answer is no, but with a lot of caveats. Okay. So no, I don't think every person has to be there on time. And on time, I think, is when you were scheduled, right? So if you were scheduled at a certain time, and there is a hard reason for why you're scheduled at that time, and a clear reason, then yeah, I think that you need to be there. So I think this is positional. I think if others aren't tied to a direct critical path. So in project management, there are tasks that are critical path to other tasks. There are people who are critical path to other people and other things that have to be done. And so when everyone else is tied directly to whether you are there on time or not, and everything's going to be delayed, then absolutely, because the team will suffer if you are not there. Anytime that there's a big team aspect and there's a pinpoint time where we get together, we come up with our plan and we go, and you aren't there for that, that means that it has to be done again, and it has to be communicated again, and which means we're having duplicate of effort that's having to happen because that said person isn't there. That's a problem. Okay, so
and half speed.
Go ahead.
Half speed too. So duplicate effort, yeah, but it's also halving your speed, right?
100.
Slowing you down.
Yep. So I think that when the tasks are way more result based than time dependent, that's where you might be able to get some of those extra, like, hey, on time, there really isn't a clear on time. We just need the results by said time. So if their position is results oriented for a more fractional position, like a financial position or something like that, where I don't really need it done every day at a certain time. I just need by Wednesday at noon, this has to be done. And if it's not done Wednesday at noon, we got big problems, and we're going to need to go to a position where you're starting at this time and doing all these things. But if it doesn't have to be done that way, then saying, well, I'm going to, it's easier for me to mandate everyone and be able to hold everyone to this. Well, that's not today, right? That's not every position. And especially a lot of those fractional positions or people who are doing a lot of different types of things that sometimes it's better after hours to do them because they have focus, clarity, and they're not having a whole bunch of overwhelming questions being asked while they're in office at the right time. Like you have to look at that. And I also think different industries have different needs. Okay. And that's where you see a lot more results based things instead of time based things. And I think the last thing I would say is I think it's good to have very clear and hard policies. Okay. I really do.
Emphasis on clear.
Yeah. Emphasis on clear. And when I say hard policies, I mean that you reward and, like discipline based off these policies. But it doesn't mean don't have grace. But when you
That's
have
right.
grace, I think it's important to communicate the grace to the team. Okay. Or always have
Absolutely.
a reason for when somebody else can be like, that's not fair. You let so and so do this, because that will happen. And that's okay. Have the conversation when it happens. But that is
Hmm.
an educating conversation. But sometimes you got to educate before they complain. Okay. Because
Hmm.
the one person complaining, it's like seeing a dolphin out in the ocean. For every dolphin you see, there are like 6 others underneath the surface you don't see. For every person who complains, there are 6 others who just don't have the guts or the comfort to go ahead and say what they're also feeling. So I think sometimes conveying, hey, we're allowing this and here's why, so that you're communicating the story so others don't. And for those stories being like single parents who need to get their kids to daycare and the daycare doesn't open
Hmm.
until a certain time. Come on, let's show grace. Sometimes you're going to lose people or lose some of your best talent because you're not willing to show grace in certain areas that you're just afraid, well, if I show it to them, they're going to do it to everyone. No, that's not true. You're showing it to
Hmm.
them. They're a good team member. People care for them. It's showing you care, but you got to communicate that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I just want to say to the whole fair thing. This is where I tend to lean a little bit more old school generational style. Like I tell my kids all the time because they're 2 different genders and 2 different stages of life, 2 different ages, 2 different personalities, 2 different situations entirely. Other than the fact that they live together and we're their parents.
Yeah.
You know, we often hear, "Well, that's not fair." They yada 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 yada. I'm like, I don't parent them the same way I parent you,
Yeah.
plain and simple.
Yep.
And I think there are different departments and different needs, like we talked about already, whether it's positional or if it's different, needs and results based or time based things. Like that, not every department can be led the exact same way. You can have an overall policy, but there might be some flexing and shifting within each of those departments as well. So let's spend the rest of our time like getting into these 7 different ways. Now, let me just say up front, this is not a end all list. This is just hey, we got together and said kind of what are the top 5 to 7. We ended up with 7, so we went with 7. I said 7 a lot there, but you get it now that we're talking about 7. So we just said, hey, these are 7 different ways that I think that we can help get people to work on time and help motivate them in the right direction. So Blake, why don't you kick us off with the first one here?
Yeah. So the first one is pretty age old. The stick is the way you do it, right? If there's the stick and the carrot, in order to motivate, there is the stick aspect. And I think as we use the stick to discipline, it's also an understanding. And I always like this, like an old shepherd who had a stick and walked around. It wasn't just to beat the sheep. Okay. The shepherd loved the sheep. It loved the flock that it had. It used the stick to guide, to correct, to discipline in a sense of like beating was rare. Okay. So if it's an or else type of mentality, that's not motivational. Okay. So when I say stick, I think that it's a clear aligning your people to the right stuff. So whether that's a point-based policy, I know a lot of larger companies do points that you get X amount of points per quarter. And as something happens, you get points against your record. And as good things happen, you get points back onto your record. That's good policy. I think that's clear as long as it's clear, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
point system's good. I think a lot of times we don't do a point system as much. We do warnings and PIP plans, and it's very what's the word? It's very intentional and relational. Yeah. The point system tends to get to a point, no pun intended there, of where it's just like, hey, this is black and white. You get a point. This happened. You get a point. Like, and there's no conversation around it. The reason I like PIP plans is there's a discussion. You understand what's going on, and there's time for correction. Hey, we're having this PIP plan on these things, but what's going on? Like, what else is happening in life for this to be the case? Do we need to talk about something deeper? Or are these things happening because of something else that maybe we can help out with? That's why we like to have conversations around PIP plans, and PIP plans not being this is black and white. We're just telling you what you need to hear and you have to deal with it. It's conversation. If you don't have conversation in your PIP plans, you don't have a PIP plan. You have an exit plan. Okay. And that's not what we want here. We want to have an improvement plan here. And if there's not conversation, there's no room for improvement.
Man, no conversation is not a pit plan. It's an exit plan. That's really good. All right. So if that's the stick, giving them the warning points and the policy and the pit plans and stuff like that, then the carrot can be our second thing, which is awards and giveaways. And now this sounds really immature, but let me just tell you up front. You can get over the whatever cliches you have in your mind about this. People, including you, love free stuff. They love free stuff. If there's an opportunity for me to win something, I'll get it. That's why so many businesses have such great lead generators getting people's email addresses. It's because, hey, if you give me this email address, I'm going to give you something for free, or you're entered into a chance to win $50,000, whatever it is. That's why we're so willing to give up our email address. It's no different than getting your team there on time. If they know that at any moment, whether it's predicted or not, that they could show up and be handed a Chick-fil-A gift card because of their loyalty of showing up on time, I'm way more apt to show up on time. Even if I'm in the executive team, I'm like, I am here. My name's on the rotation. I'm in the spinny ball. I'm in the little bingo thing that's going to pop out. My name is on one of those balls in that basket. I have a chance to win, so I'm going to show up. So there's multiple different awards and giveaways that you could choose from. I will say this: do not institute an award giveaway plan that no one cares about. You're like, hey, you know what? I really love rugby, so we're going to give away rugby tickets. Yeah. I'm just telling you right now, no one likes rugby. You're the only one. So, like, just know your team enough to know that whatever you're going to give away, whatever the award system is, and even, it could even be an internal award. Like, hey, you get an extra day off.
Yeah.
You get a comp day whenever you want.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't have to be the straight up, like, physical, I'm going to hand you a gift kind of thing. You can reward your people by showing up on time, by giving them more time off.
Yeah.
Again, it's an incentive and people are going to love it. So the carrot here, when we say awards and giveaways, what we're really saying is incentives. You can have incentives. You can make them random. I love the idea that when you show up to something and you didn't expect to get something and it's there, then word travels fast. Oh, I better be there next time for the next thing.
Yep.
It creates that sense of FOMO, right? Which I think we're going to get into here in just a little bit. But all right, Blake, what's our third one?
Yeah, I think the next one is connecting attendance to profit sharing, bonuses, however you do it. I think this is a really important one that we miss because we're like, oh, but they helped out on this job and they helped out on this. You're right. But I think, and I said this at one of our notes days recently with my team, I said, a part of being the team is being here to be part of the team. And if you're not here, that's permission to play. If you're not showing up and you're letting the team down, wouldn't you be upset that you went on to a job and did a ton of work and brought that job in at like the best point, and you even worked extra hours because someone wasn't showing up and you went above and beyond, and then everyone got profit sharing equal? You would be pissed. I would be pissed. I get that. So why then would we not connect that to the same profit sharing bonus structure, whatever it is? It's almost like the only people that seems unfair to are those who are not showing up. And so this is where, like, and again, there are always reasons to give permission why something's not happening or to show grace. And I think that's important. But if there are like repeat offenders, they're 100%. It shouldn't be like, oh, you missed one day or you showed up 2 minutes late one day because of a traffic accident, and then now you don't get bonus for that quarter. That's perhaps not reasonable. But I think that's got to be the question: is what's reasonable, what's not, and then connecting that and tying it directly to it. Don't make that the only KPI. That's a permission to play KPI. Okay, so they still got to excel and do whatever their KPI is. But this is a permission to play kind of thing. So definitely think that connecting it is really important there.
All right, so far we've covered the stick, which would be like the warning points policy that sticks with follow through, the performance improvement plan, having follow up, things like that. The carrot, talking about the awards or giveaways or certain incentives. And then thirdly, we talked about connecting to different profit sharing or bonuses. Fourth, let's get into this topic of inspiration a little bit. I think it's often overlooked because it's often thought of as a little ethereal, not very quantifiable, kind of can't really get my hands around what it means when I say the inspiration piece. I think there's a couple things here, and then I want to know your thoughts too on this one, Blake. But I think for the most part, we need to remember that unless we inspire our teams, someone else will. Let me say that a different way. If we don't inspire our teams, someone else will.
Yeah.
They will always be inspired, just like you, just like me, just like everybody else. We will always be inspired by something. So why not be the voice of inspiration to your team? And it could be a variety of different topics. It could be inspiration on the industry that you're in. It could be inspiration with them personally and their family. When we talk a lot about Gen Z and millennials having a very strong work-life balance kind of moral standard, this is an opportunity for you to kind of speak into that. And so when we say inspiration, I think we're talking a little bit about inspiring them to be better versions of themselves and better teammates and better team members of your team.
Yeah.
But then there's also inspiration to connecting them to the why and why you do what you do. And there's that sort of inspiration as well, right? To kind of recenter the group back on everything. Our last episode last week, when you were, if you caught that episode, if you didn't, I strongly suggest you do. We had a good friend of ours, Caleb Campbell, on, and he talked about consistently connecting your team to the why, which again is just a very used phrase, right? We hear that all the time. Remind them of the why. Remind them of the why. There's a reason that you hear that all the time.
That's right.
Because it's that important.
Yeah.
It's that important to connect them to the why. Blake or Caleb shared with us that you need to connect them. You need to have a sense of identity, a sense of community, and a sense of opportunity. If you can have identity, community, and opportunity, that will consistently inspire your team.
Yeah. And one thing about inspiration is that inspiration and purpose are so closely connected. And so what you're inspiring them to is not necessarily the thing, like the thing that they're doing. You're inspiring them to a higher level of holding why they're doing something, right? So that's connecting them to some type of purpose is the big push, is the big mover here. So I love that. I love connecting them to the inspiration. I think, is it the fifth? Yeah, the fifth thing is creating a sense of FOMO. Okay, so many people, and I'll just say, I remember being back in third or fourth or fifth grade. I don't remember. I was young. And I had a tendency to be sick a lot, which really meant that I would be at home eating ho-hos and watching Rookie of the Year. Okay, on repeat, right? On VHS, Be Kind, Rewind, all day, right? So when that was the case, that was what I was. I remember one day I did that just because wasn't really feeling it. Happened to be an impromptu field day that I missed out on. And it was like everyone the next day was, oh, how cool was that? How awesome. And I didn't miss a day after that for at least the next 3 years solid. I went from like questionable to like winning the attendance award at school. Okay, that was me. And that's so dumb. But I remember every time I was like, I mean, there were times that I was legitimately sick. And I was like, there ain't a way in hell I'm missing impromptu field day again. So creating some kind of scheduled spontaneity within your teams is going to create some sense of like FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, by the way, fear of missing out, FOMO, just to make sure y'all are like, what's he talking about?
It's an acronym.
Yeah, it's an acronym. It's just the thing we do. So anyway, create something like that within your team, whether it's an impromptu taking everyone to lunch day, and you just go out and do that weekly. And, whoever your culture person is or your team leads or whatever, you just have them go out and do that kind of stuff just to create that moment. And it's going to build your teams, but it is also going to create this mentality that people don't want to miss out on that kind of stuff. So that's a really good one, is creating FOMO with some kind of scheduled spontaneity. Number 6, this is one we've done recently and we've seen great gains from, and that is creating a 4-day work week. Seems like an annoying like scheduling type of thing. Seems like you're going to miss out on productivity. Seems like ... Absolutely not. There is more scientific evidence that more can be done in a 10-hour day than an 8-hour day. And I know you're like, yeah, because there's 2 more hours. False. Okay. That's not why. There is a lot of reasons of startups and shutdowns are where you lose the most energy. And this is not a whole thing on the 4-day work week. But while I'm here, the other side is that when you have less startups and shutdowns, that means you're having focused attention. How often do you have an 8-hour day? You get a lot done in the beginning, then you hit lunch, and then you have that lull and a slower end of the day, and you end up starting up the next day on the thing you did the day before because you didn't get it done. We are seeing great gains from that, but what we're also seeing, which is more pertinent to what we're talking about today, is the fact that people are not calling off, because to lose 10 hours, and we kind of have this policy, and I say kind of because we haven't fully said it. We've said it to some teams, just not all of them yet. And that is, we're not going to reschedule you on the day that is off. So that day is off. Our team is working on this day, this day, this day, and this day. If you are off, I'm sorry, that sucks, but we're not going to try to reschedule you. So if you miss the day, you miss the day. And it sounds harsh, but it is a way that we don't have people to where our leaders are having to come in 5 days for 50 hours. We're not going to penalize those who are pushing hard here. So that's one of the things we've done recently. We've seen really great success.
Yeah, and I say to the leader, too, who's probably thinking, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to take that extra day of work off. And whenever I hear this argument, I always point to the biggest proven concept in this category, which is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has far exceeded all of their competitors in 6 days, when their other competitors are sometimes, they're open 7 days, but some of their competitors are even open 24/7. And Chick-fil-A is still outselling them. It's still outselling them. It's because of the culture that they've created there and working hard and getting things done. That leads us to our 7th one, which is setting a workday huddle or a meeting at the start time of the day. And let me just say this too. A lot of people do this, but then they'll set it for, let's say it's 9 a.m. Hey, at 9 a.m. we're all going to hop on Zoom. At 9 a.m. we're all going to be here, there, around the square, wherever it is that your meeting place is. But then they'll sit around and just chit chat for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And the people that showed up on time are like, what? Why even show up on time? We don't even really get started until 9:15. There is, there are lots of culture killers out there, but this is definitely one of the top culture killers, is not starting things when you say you're going to start them. But whether it be let's just wait till Bill gets here, Nancy gets here, or I just wanted to catch up on everybody's weekend. There are other times for that. Like if you're having a set meeting time for anything, whether it's the beginning of the day or not, start it on time, no matter who's there or not. If someone comes in late to a meeting and the meeting is already in progress, they will get the hint very quickly that if they don't get there on time, they're going to miss vital information that they need to do their job.
This is going to reflect poorly on them. This is big on churches too. I see so many churches who are like, why don't people show up on time? Gosh, in my day, we just showed up. Well, they don't start on time. Like they are like, well, let's wait till we have X percentage of people here. It makes sense because we don't want to sing to empty seats. You're going to keep singing to empty seats and until you set the standard, until you say this is what we're doing. And so if you have no standard of that, then you're missing out.
And it'll just keep getting later and later and later. Sooner or later, your 9 o'clock meeting is it doesn't start really until 10:30, and you've wasted a lot of time. You waste a lot of your time, a lot of your team's time, a lot of that productive time they could have been using, especially in the morning. But either way, it's a great tactic to set a workday huddle or a meeting at the start of the day, whether it be every day, beginning of the week, all team, certain days, departments, other days. Cohorts, other days, doesn't matter. So having that, I think, in your regular rotation is a good way, and kind of our final tip for getting your team to work on time. Any final thoughts or comments on this topic, Blake, before we wrap up?
Yeah, this is all more mindset shift than anything. So these are things you can do, but see them in the midst of how it's going to affect your culture and how you're going to push with culture here. Okay. And not just well, I'll just do this, this, and this, and that didn't work, so I'm never doing that again. Like, don't have that mentality going into this. Think of how we can create better lives for everyone involved here. Okay. So, use the stick, use the carrot, connect to profit sharing and bonus, have inspiration, right? Connects to purpose, create the FOMO or the scheduled spontaneity. Think about a 4-day work week. And I know you might be like, in my industry, that just doesn't work. Every industry has said that at one point. Okay. Like everyone, because what they're used to is what they're used to. We now are in a construction company, and I've had so many construction, like other companies say, yeah, the 4-day work week just wouldn't work for us. And I'm like, we're doing it. And they're like, well, how are you doing it? See how the conversation changed? As soon as you believe that something can happen, it changes. We're like, we write it into our contracts. And so it entices this mentality of, oh, we can set a standard of how we operate. Okay. So 4-day work week, think about it. And then the last one is set a workday huddle meeting at the start of the day. It's just going to kick it off in the right way, and then just hold the space. You are the leader. Hold the space for that meeting. Okay. And if people aren't showing up on time, then maybe go to the stick or the carrot at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Blake said, these things are mindset shifts. And so what we would encourage you is just take one of these things.
That's
if
right.
you're struggling to get people to work on time and show up, just take one that you feel like resonates the most with you, or you feel like would be the easiest on-ramp to your team or to your current culture and organization. Just go ahead and take one of those things and start implementing that through your leadership team this week and see what happens. I think over time, this is a long play, right? This is not an immediate fix, but over time, you're going to see that you're going to have people starting to show up on work, not just on time, but inspired and ready to work as well. So next week, we'll be back with you, episode 48. We're going to talk about how to maintain a clear vision. People perish for lack of vision. So let's get clear about it. And we're going to do that. And another acronym. Can't wait to share that with you next week on the Culture Based Podcast.